Ooh, a roster that I would like to talk about.
Who's interesting to you? Oh,
Can't say Vitality.
There's a,
No, I'm
you
not
can
gonna
do
say
Vitality if you
Vitality.
want, but we'll have to take some different angles. So where do you want to go? Go on.
I would like to know where we set our expectations on the current Falcons.
Ooh,
Because
okay.
I think this honestly, it's like my brain is sort of struggling to land on like a fixed opinion because you keep balancing between like this pre-concept of, oh, it's a brand new team. I really don't know. And then I realized, but hold on a second. No, actually, no, it's the end score. There's like a huge basis that you can build on. And then you add Magisk to that. Immediate boost. Like Magisk is an improvement on Anchor of the Year, of course, by a landslide. And then you have the Boros, which is kind of, I don't know what the fuck Boros is going to do. I have no idea.
I don't know if he does, quite frankly. You know what I mean?
Bro, it's like, I don't know what's going to happen with Boros. But like, I struggle to set, like right now in the HT ranking, they're top 10. I struggle to set from a leaner perspective my own scale of where Falcon is. Do I imagine Falcon is already going to go for playoffs? Are they not? I have a sense that with what they have now, they should already be equipped to make playoffs run from the get-go. With the end score plus Magisk in here as an immediate addition, I think they should already be equipped to make top 8 at events from the get-go. That's where I see it. So I'll open to you. I mean, Yanko, you can also tell me where's your starting estimate, the starting, I would say, expectation for the Falcon project.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, their first event is now Blast. It's there with Vitality, Astralis, and OG. Of course, Vitality, Astralis, Falcons in the same group. So two of the teams that we've been talking about here, Falcons and Astralis, going head to head. I think it's going to be between these two for the second spot in the group and to have a chance to qualify. But well, the way you look at it is, the end score with different coaching staff. And then you have Magisk and Boros in there. Boros, who's a completely X Factor. Magisk, who I think is probably the most underrated player when it comes to that Vitality run and how much who was contributing. When you look at the big events, the big games, that's where his experience really kicked in. The way he plays is, there's no second guessing there. It's really decisive. So I like it. Obviously, with Zonic and Lars, they know how to do these, early boot camps and how to get the team to get on the same page. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of back and forth between Snappy and Zonic, getting to the same page. And we saw when Zonic first joined Vitality, I mean, it took them a full year or so, maybe a little bit more than a year for him and Apex to come to an agreement on how they're supposed to play and how he's supposed to call. And that's when they started finding some success. So fuck me, I don't know. By the time, like, I feel like I put enough trust. I think the team is experienced and skilled enough, and that the coaching staff is obviously also experienced and skilled enough, where even with this limited amount of time, considering that the format, the DR margin, all this shit, they're still best of ones, I think, and all this bullshit, I still want to say Falcons, like, make the major, You're
being fairly conservative, though. You're not going to hype them?
Yeah, well, no. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they win an event. I don't think they upset Vitality in this first tournament, like in their Blast group. They could squeak in one of those last two spots potentially, but they could also lose to Astralis, and that would be fine. I mean, it's the first tournament for the lineup. When it comes to Katowice, same thing, right? It would depend where they are with the team. Like, what is it that they're trying to do? Are they going to play the way Ents played, more or less, right? And Snappy just going to incorporate Magisk and Boros into that sort of a style? Or is it going to be a little bit of an adjustment and some of the Zonic's view of the game that Snappy is going to have to be implementing? And until we can even see that a little bit or hear it from some of the interviews, it's going to be hard to tell how much time they will need to get good. Because if it is just the end style and Snappy has to get two more guys to sort of fit into that style, then that's the faster and easier path to success, so to speak. But yeah, there's so many teams that are in flux right now that they've made at least like some small changes. So yeah, I don't see them being really a contender this early on.
The key thing for me with this roster is I actually feel like the name Falcons and that whole drama about Nico, and then they thought it was going to be like none of the players would join. I feel like that's like a smokescreen that's distracted everyone, because it makes way more sense if you look at it from this is the Eds core plus 2 players. That's a way easier like lens to apply to analyze the team and see what they might be like and what they can do. Because if you're looking at the idea it's like Falcons, then for example, the Nico thing skews the whole thing. Like for example, when Snappy was joining that team, that was to get a very different squad than he had now. Like first up point of order there was to get Nico, something Snappy's never had. Like, you know, one of the absolute like bona fide best players in the whole world. Well, that's a totally different ball game if you're Snappy and you're calling for a player like that, as opposed to trying to make a Spinks into that, trying to make a Nerds into that player. That's a different game completely. So first of all, he didn't get that team anyway. So to me, it's way more like Ents. You're in an Ents type project, but maybe with arguably on paper slightly better players. And then because you've kept the core, and by the way, if we're looking at the team, look, Diha obviously was incredibly influential in that team because he was there the whole time. But if you actually look at the pieces, right, the 2 most important pieces in Counter-Strike, in my opinion, is in-game leader and Star Orper. They've got both of those and they've already played together. Madden was basically, like, as far as I can tell, like the best fill player in Tier 1 Counter-Strike and just does whatever's left over and all the dirty work. So already he could surely walk in and make this team good. And then look, yeah, you lost Nerds, who, let's be real, stats-wise was your, like, big production guy with Sun Pius. But I'll tell you what, Magisk isn't going to put the HLTV rating of Nerds up, but he's going to bring, put it this way, if I'm going roll for will, he's better than Diha. Diha was good, but Nux is... So here's the difference. To me, you've maybe lost some of the knockout power that Nerds had when he would pop off and be MVP, but I think Magisk actually is a floor raiser. The difference is, I could see like the baseline level of this team be really good. If you think of the core plus Magisk, I agree with you, Yanko. One of the things I hate in general, I'll probably do a video on this one day, is if you want to talk about like superstar, like pressure to carry, Zero has been on some teams where he was the only player who could do it. That is true. But I always hated that even in like the original first Vitality, people just looked at the stats and they were like, oh, Alex, NBK, RPK, these are all shit players. Like, they're definitely not shit. I'll never hear the idea they are shit players. They didn't have good production numbers, guys, but they're obviously, here's the difference. If RPK is a 1.0 rating player at the time, he's not like a random tier 2 player who has a 1.0 rating. He's adding way more to the game and the team structure and the balance and the experience. Like, that counts for something. So I don't care if Magisk has like a 1.07 rating or something. His impact is way bigger in a game than just another player doing a 1.07 rating. Like, I agree, this player's a mad sleeper. Because what killed me about the team that won the major is they tried to make it sound like it was 2019 Vitality, like Zero just carried on his own. First of all, there's a reason Spinks was just voted 5th best player in the world, guys. Like, he's already really good. And then Magisk is like your fucking third wheel, probably the best third wheel ever in Counter-Strike. Like, he's up there for that. He's fucking sick. I even think he's a player where, because sometimes he did it on T-side, you just don't see the stats because it's not like his individual stats are skewed, but you look at the kills he would get, they'd break the whole round open. It's part of the reason why actually some of those close games didn't get kind of squeaky bomb time against those underdog teams. He was just making sure that Zero could wake up into a game and then take over. So I think people are underrating Magisk in this lineup, mate. I was kind of, once I found out Snappy gets the end score plus Magisk, I was like, actually, they're cooking with gas here. There's something here. But the obvious problem comes down to the Boros. Look, maybe skill-wise Boros is nuts, but the problem I have is, with no disrespect, he just looked a bit brainless whenever I've seen him play. And some of the stories are sort of similar. Like, he's a bit inexperienced. He just maybe no tier 1 meta of how to play Counter-Strike. So essentially, I'm putting a lot on Zonic's plate there because it's going to depend how Boris plays too, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also a fair assumption to be made that Zonic and Snappy will help Boros sort of be a more complete player, or at least point him in the right direction.
Yes.
Right? And being able to utilize, even if it is a narrow skill set, being able to utilize it to the best of his abilities. One of the question marks for me as well is, who is the star rifler on this team? Like we just talked about, who plays Nuke Yard here, right? Like, you either go like Boros, like if you really want to put, but I feel like that's too much responsibility to put on him, right? Because those are positions where a player has to know on his own what to do, find the proper timing, right? Play off of his team and so forth. And then it's between Madden and Magisk. And Magisk did do it for a while towards the end of that Astralis team, but I feel like he would be best if he just kept doing what he was doing in Vitality. I feel like that would work best for this Falcons lineup. I would actually give more responsibility to Madden.
I mean,
in that sense,
isn't this
I feel
something
like
that, and obviously you know this guy, isn't it something I've heard behind the scenes, similar things, Yanko, that people say there's way more depth to this guy's game. It's just he sort of agrees personality-wise to do the sort of sacrificial roles. Like he could essentially expand his game out a bit, right?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And once Ents stepped up a little bit was when they gave him a little bit more responsibility in game, and he could have some of his moves implement and not just be the bitch 100% of the time, So I would like to see that, at least for this iteration of the lineup, how it pans out. It could be a bit of a trial for him in that sense, because he's also one of those guys who's vocal, right? You need to be, when you play those positions, say what you need or what you can do for the team in the mid round, make some of those calls. So yeah, I'm interested to see how they set it up, because it's something where like you're thinking it should be Magisk, but just he hasn't really been in that role for a while now, like probably during his whole tenure in Vitality. It's been even Apex sometimes that's been doing that for them on the rifle, right? Like with Zywo playing the rotator with the op. So yeah, I would like it to be Madden.
So the way I would look at it is, I feel like if what you're aiming for is the maximized return and the maximum potential of this team, I do think that the end goal is to finally have Boros play these roles. Because in terms of, if we're trying to position Madden, Magisk, and Boros, and we see what's the most we can get out of them compared to their positions and roles, I feel like Magisk already, he feels the joke completely. Like, that's it. He's your anchor. There's almost no other anchor I would have.
It's like we said about Naf, right? Just leave him alone.
Exactly.
He's already doing his job. Just let him have his roles, mate.
And I think there's a lot of comparison to be made between like the Twist of phase and the Magisk of Vitality, and how the numbers, you have to be very careful with how you look at them, because they have so little resources devoted to them that their numbers are actually much higher than what they look like. That's my opinion on Magisk.
Okay.
Then Madden, I think he could do more than what he's doing, but I do think that as a fail, again, he pushes the envelope so high up as a fail that I don't know if anybody can just step into his role and be the quote-unquote bitch of the round and still be able to have that impact. So if I'm the creator, the architect of this Falcons, my goal is to have Boros being able to handle these positions, because he's obviously got a huge mechanical skill. Everybody with two eyes can see that. But I think that in the previous Falcon project, he probably had the wrong mindset, as is, hey, this is sort of a team that I can have, so I better call my own numbers, because I don't know who the hell is next to me. Yeah, this NBK guy, I kind of know him. But MHL, Longs, like, who are these guys? Like, if I'm going to get ahead and have this career, I better just really have a lot of frags. This mentality has to go straight to the trash with this Falcons team. Like, he has to be 300% more humble and be like, okay, whatever these guys are going to tell me, I am going to treat it as a religious commandment, and I'm going to follow all of this, and I'm going to try to be better and apply all of that philosophy. And if you do that, I don't know if he's capable of doing it. I have no idea. That's a big if. But if he can have this kind of mindset and listen to what Snappy would say, listen to what Zonic would say, taking all of the experience, and then sort of use his mechanical skill to apply it, holy hell. Like, of course he's going to make mistakes. Of course, he's not going to be able to make all the right decisions the way Nico would when he's playing Yard, or Rain would when he's playing Yard. We're not going to have that straight up. But if he's in the right mindset and he can work towards that to use his mechanical skill, that's how I would use him. The question is, are you ready to stomach some of the losses and mistakes that are going to happen along the way? And these are usually pretty costly mistakes in these roles.
By the way, since obviously I did contrast Snappy at the beginning of the whole episode with like Huxley's the person I would like to consider an upgrade if you were going to go for a player like that, I will say I actually think that I hope everyone who's hating on this Falcons lineup keeps that energy if they succeed, because the number one person who better get the credit is fucking Snappy. Because remember, the reason you all laughed at this lineup is they don't have a Nico. Well, I'll tell you what, if they have no Nico and he can actually get this team to like top 5 in the world, then he's obviously a fucking insanely good in-game leader, and these pieces are underrated. Because that's the other thing I would say about this squad is, if this team has success with this lineup, without Boros developing more or without getting a bigger name in as the rifler, this is more in the vein of actually what Heroic with Cadian was like. Like, they didn't have the best players in the world. It's just that the unit was fucking awesome together. I always used to even say, like, it's why actually the Astralis thing's interesting. I always used to even wonder, like, we can't even really know on the Heroic team, how good is Stound supposed to be? Like, because he was never playing any kind of a selfish game in the same way as, like, trapped stars do when they're on bad lineups, you know, Like, he was just part of a team. And sometimes he could get lost in the floor. Sometimes he could be the focal point of the floor. In this team, this is going to have to be like Snappy and Zonic going to have to fucking do work in this team. But I also do think you've got kind of, like I say, some sleeper pieces where maybe a casual fan thinks like, oh, this is like an incomplete team. It is, but they can still do something, in my opinion. Like, the pieces are that, like I say, there's also a world where you've got to stop thinking Falcons. Think like essentially like a reworked Dents, a remixed Dents essentially. And yeah, there's a basis that you can walk into the first game and you've got something at least. It's not starting at 0. That counts for something, I think.
I agree. I'm going to have to see the more. I agree with Yenko in the fact that some of the events and some of the days that are coming up might be a little too close. But I also think the way, because Yenko asked the question, do you want to do a remixed of ends, or you want to create something new?
Yes.
I personally think that Snappy, whatever he found in ends, whatever way of playing Counter-Strike he found, he should stick with that. It works, and it's very friendly to let this kind of mix of players of different nationalities. It's very eclectic in how he plays the game. I think this works, and I also think this is where he's the best, when he's got a couple of like great fast call, he's got some of these executes. Just follow that, right? But make sure that you integrate Magisk and his experience and his voice in these key moments. I don't think Snappy should try to completely revisit how he plays the game. I think he already nailed that pretty well in ends. And some of the failures and some of the shortcomings of that lineup, I wouldn't necessarily put on Snappy and how he plays the game. So I hope he sort of stays true to the philosophy of Counter-Strike he wants to play and just utilizes the pieces that he's got.
Well, ultimately, it comes down to, why do you think ends didn't win more tournaments?
I think some players were choking.
Yeah, I think for me, the answer is, well, some players, when I say some players, I mean, Dicha didn't play up to the same level in those big games like he did in groups, and he had important positions on the team. And the other thing is, they lost to really good fucking teams who had these players. They lost in Cologne to G2, who had, Nico popping off and Monacy and everyone playing really well. They lost to Vitality at Gamers 8, right? Who obviously has Zywin, who were on their way up. So along the way, they were losing to teams who were better than them. And sure, at some point, you have to beat those teams if you're going to solidify yourself at that level. But before we knew it, apparently, that their run came to an abrupt end. So for me, I was always impressed with some Pius. Like, really, I was even like not sure if that was going to work out for Ends. Like, how much did he really show us in Movistar? Turns out he's just a stud, in big games. Everything, like, just a great all-around player. Snappy, proven himself as a leader as well. Madden, I think, is good enough. So it's only like, how will Boros and Magus do compared to Dicha and Nerds? And the different like coaching, will it be able to help and sort of make them as good or potentially even better than that Ends team was? And until we see at least some of the games and get a feel for how they're playing and what we can expect from some of these players, going to be tough to know. And also the playing field is different than 6 months ago, right? Obviously, you have Vitality as the undisputed best team in the world, but FaZe arguably upgraded with Frozen over Twists. G2 made a change, which seemed really questionable at the time. We'll have to see how it pans out.
By the way, I want people who remember earlier in the episode, I think Yanko nailed the lens that, at least from G2's reasoning, you should apply if you're going to judge this team fairly. They're not saying Nexa actually is better than JKS and will frag more. What they're saying is JKS is somebody who required sometimes resources, whereas Nexa isn't going to. He's going to be sacrificial and sort of boost the rest of the team. That was kind of the logic, right?
Yeah. And basically sometimes going to be a little bit more aggressive,
right?
Playing by himself on the other side of the map, right? Because of what the team is doing. Now is the timing for you to go and look for a fight. And even if you lose it, it was a good call, right?
Yes.
And maybe you will win it, and that in itself will win us the round. And the timing is good for you because this player will maybe be distracted, or you'll even be able to get a little bit into the side and he's going to come back from a rotation, things like that, where you just need to take the risk a little bit more often, and that's what they're hoping to get.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.